What's going on, y'all? Welcome to BTT Presents The Security Booth. I am your host, Fleeks, also known as Blind Security of the Community. Got a good episode for y'all today? All right, let's stay tuned. Let's get with it. Blinded, but not broken. Today's guest is a living example of what it means to choose life. He is a Marine, a survivor, an athlete, a developer, and a storyteller. He shows you that nothing's impossible when it seems like it's lost. Welcome to the table, Zach Tidwell. Hey, welcome, my man.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a powerful intro. So thanks, man.
Try to do you justice, baby. I've been, listening to your show and to the podcast, and man, I just love the strength, the passion that you have, and yeah, for sure, had to make sure that intro do you justice, man, for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Oh, definitely.
Glad to hear somebody's listening to it. So,
right,
yeah.
right on out there. That's what we do here for. I'm trying to bridge the gaps and just build that awareness amongst the communities, and just let people know that life is possible no matter what we have to go through. You know what I'm talking about? So for our listeners, Zach, just breaking it down. That's a little brief background because I know, but for my listeners, let them know where you kind of where you're from and how you grew up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not really from anywhere. I grew up all over the place because I
There we
was a
go.
military brat.
Yes,
But
sir.
I finished high school in Colorado and enlisted into the Marines straight out of high school. I I started talking to a recruiter when I was like 16, and he was like,
Wow.
"Hey, man, I can't even work with you right now. Like, you got to come back when you're 17." But I'd known my whole life I wanted to go into the military, so that's what I did. And I joined the Marine Corps Infantry and became a machine gunner and served for 4 years and deployed twice, but thankfully never saw combat. And that was about as short and sweet as I can be, kind of bringing things up to where everything is that we're probably going to dive into.
Right on, right on. Hey, that's incredible. So you already was just, ready, passionate about going serving for the country and just doing your part at an early stage. Man, that's incredible because a lot of people it takes them time to kind of get to that point. But at 16, you was like, hey, sign me up, huh?
Yeah, and it seems to be the trend in my family that pretty much every male in the family has gone into the military. I think I was the first Marine, but it was
Nice.
just, I grew up wanting to be like the men in my family, and especially my dad. I wanted to be, he was a huge role model to me and someone that I looked up to. And so that I was never pushed in that direction. It just wound up that I was drawn to it. And by the time that I was a 16-year-old, I wanted to join the deadliest conventional fighting force on earth. And so that's what I did.
Hey, big salute. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Man, and so from so just being in the Marine, pretty much that's when the incident happened for you. Let's talk a little bit more about it. Tell us about the journey and how you became blind with the Marine story.
Yes, I probably should have clarified. People listening probably realize this, but you can't go in the Marines if you're blind. So
Right.
I did have a normal life growing up and no disabilities, but this was actually it was on my second deployment. I'd gotten married before my second deployment to my high school sweetheart. Found
Nice.
out on the deployment found out on the deployment that she was having an affair, and I found out from the other guy's wife because he was married. So
Wow.
yeah, she tracked me down and was like, "Hey, man, I don't know if you're cool with this, but I'm not." And here's some screenshots of texts going back and forth. Um, so that was late 2017. I came home from that deployment in November of 2017 and tried to make things work with her, and it ultimately
Mm.
didn't. So we separated, I think, in January of 2018, and as you can imagine, wasn't the happiest that I had ever been at this
Yeah, I could
point.
imagine nobody
Yeah.
at the right, exactly.
Yeah, but I was dealing with it, and I was
Mm-hmm.
keeping myself very, very busy. I'd been active my entire life and played sports year round growing up, but really became a gym rat. And then Also, on the weekends, if we weren't out in the field, because as an infantryman, I mean, your work is out in the field doing infantry things.
Right.
If we weren't gone on the weekends, I was taking my dirt bike out to the racetrack. And one weekend in March, so about 2 months after I finally separated from my now ex-wife, I was in a really nasty motorcycle accident and had a traumatic brain injury from it. And I started to spiral after that. I still don't know all of what happened today, and I have a background that's been filled in from, those around me and those who ultimately were like able to come get me that day.
I can
But
relate. I can relate. Yes, sir.
yeah, and so, but I really started to spiral after that. I became very impulsive, very agitative, couldn't sleep, and ultimately developed an alcohol problem because that's how I could sleep. I could shut my mind off because I was after
Needed to
that.
escape. Hmm.
Yeah, because I started, and I didn't realize this at the time. I mean, these are all stereotypical and well known, well documented side effects of traumatic brain injuries. And so I was ruminating on everything with my now ex-wife and couldn't sleep. And so I found like, all right, if I had a drink or two before bed, then I could kind of shut it off and
Right.
quiet it down a little bit. And that turned into 3 or 4 drinks and continued through August of 2018. I finished my enlistment. And so I was honorably discharged, got out, returned to Colorado and started going to college to become an ER nurse. And
Nice.
but my drinking kept progressing, and so did my. That was in tandem with my mental state was getting worse. So I would drink more, and it just developed into a worse and worse problem. And
Mm.
but the problem with all of this was I wasn't speaking up because I thought speaking up was showing weakness, right? Like
Yeah, as a man, like we're not supposed to talk about this, right? We're supposed to
yeah.
just swallow these feelings and just handle what we handle. Yeah.
Well, and especially I'm 22 at the time, really, mature in the sense that I've done a lot for a 22-year-old, but you're still relative to life. You're not that mature, even though I was mature for a 22-year-old. And so
I hear
didn't
you.
have the wherewithal to recognize, in my mind, I was like, I'm an infantry marine. I can get through this. I've been through worse.
Right.
And shutting up and sucking it up and gritting through it in the Marines is what got me to where I was. And I excelled in the Marines. And so I mistakenly thought that that would carry over to my mental health, and it just didn't. So I kept spiraling, kept getting worse and worse, and was keeping up appearances. I was getting straight A's in college, working full time at a local hospital, doing well, and
Just pushing through, pushing through.
on in terms of appearances.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear
But
you.
yeah, and so I really was like looking back, I was becoming so apathetic about everything and I was trying to keep up appearances to the extent that, motorcycles were still my thing when the weather was nice, but in the winter time I was a snowboarder. And
Mm.
that fall I was trying to as I was reaching these points where, okay, it's gotten past where I can't sleep. It's to where now it's getting myself to do anything outside of like my core responsibilities was pulling teeth. The only things I was really showing up for every day was I would get up super early so I could work out before school and before work, and then I'd show up for school and work, and that was about it. But outside of that, I was withdrawing, and I noticed that, but I didn't notice how severe it was. So I would like try and force myself to get out of the house and all right, I'm gonna load all my stuff up, drive to the racetrack, pay to get into the racetrack and unload all my gear, or just get there and be like, man, I still don't want to be here. And
Mm.
knowing turning around and just going home would look weird and I would have to explain
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
I would sit in my truck for a couple hours before I went home so that it looked like I went to the racetrack and rode. And I did the same thing with snowboarding. I would drive a couple hours up to the mountains, get there and be like, man, I really don't want to be here. But I would stay there for several hours, just sitting in my truck and, doom scrolling or whatever, or just sitting there in the quiet and being miserable and then drive home so that people thought I was still doing
Putting
the
up,
things that I
holding up
was.
the image is, yeah, I understand
Yeah.
that. Yes, sir. Yes,
And
sir.
that carried through the end of 2018. And by March of 2019, so a year after the motorcycle accident, I'd reached the point where I didn't want to be here anymore. And shot myself in the head on March 31st of 2019. I shot myself between the eyes, and that is it cost me my sight, my hearing in one ear, no sense of smell. The bridge of my nose and right eye socket were all blown out. I mean, my face is held together with a titanium plate now, and it's still very, very handsome for people wondering. So that's
Hey,
always no.
let them know. Let them know. That's that's what I
Yeah.
like to say because I took a 12 gauge to the face, and I mean, it was my incident was just drive by shooting, but that's one thing I always say to everybody, like, hey, I'm still the handsomest man that I was when I had the sight,
Yeah.
even with the damage, the scars, I'm
Yeah.
hey, still handsome, energy still good, and it's
It's
blessing to
important.
see you that strong. Yes, sir. Yes,
How
sir.
long ago was yours?
Mine was January 19th of 2006.
Okay.
That happened to me at the age of 16.
Wow.
I was turning 17 that following August, but I had to go through that whole little journey of losing the sight, had stroke. I ended up being like half paralyzed. I had to go through that fight of like making my body move again. So I can understand. I can relate to the that kind of that just having to kind of suck it up and like go through these different struggles and and kind of fight within yourself.
Yeah, and you have, both of us had the choice of, okay, I can let this ruin my life, or I can get through this and make something of it.
Real talk, and that brings me to my next question. Because I, you put in your notes and whatnot, like you didn't want to just consume to that, and you didn't want to be a bump on a log. Like, talk to me about more about that. What made you not want to be that bump?
Yeah, and I'd like to come back and ask you the same thing after
For
this because
sure,
I'm curious, but
for sure.
it, I I don't remember that night, but and I was on life support for some time after, but when they brought me off of life support and I finally came to, I was so out of it from the brain injury and probably all the meds that I had been on that I didn't
Yeah.
even realize that I was blind. So I could have a conversation like we're having right now. And even though I couldn't see you, I was seeing these very just vivid, otherworldly like settings, even though I couldn't see the
Mm,
people I was talking to, but and
yeah.
it didn't click. But they were when I did finally kind of get with it, they told me that I was going to get sight back in my left eye. And once I had the facial reconstruction surgery, and one day because I was still in the ICU at this point, the docs came around. This woman came into the room and was doing her normal thing, like, "All right, you're Zach Tidwell. You're 23 years old. Do you know why you're in here?" Yes, and I would tell them, and then she'd be like, "And," she's going down the list, and she's like, "And you're going to be totally blind." She said something to the extent of like, "All right, you're going to be totally blind, or you are totally blind, and you will be for the rest of your life." Again,
Mm.
don't remember exactly how that was said, but there was no easing into it. She just
No,
dropped it on me,
I
and I
hear
was
you.
like, "What did you just say?" And so, she winds up leaving the room like, "Yeah, hey, that's what it says here. Is you're going to be totally blind." And
Simple point blank. Mm.
yeah, and later that day when my parents got to the hospital, we started talking about like my parents were like, "Oh, well, you can get a guide dog and maybe you could be a therapist." And I don't know what it was about that like triggered this memory, but at least in the chow hall, which is like our cafeteria on
Mm.
the area on the north end of Camp Pendleton where I was stationed,
Okay.
the salt and pepper shakers said in really tiny print, proud by the blind and visually made proudly by the blind and visually impaired. And
Mm.
I don't know what like in that moment snapped my mind back to that, but do you swear on here?
Oh yeah, oh, yeah. You good, man?
I my parents were listing stuff off, and my response without any sort of preamble is, "I'm not making fucking salt and pepper shakers." And they were like, "What are you talking about?" And so I explained it, and but that was, my mind. It was
That was the
again,
click.
yeah, I'm a Marine.
Yeah.
I've sought these higher things in my life, and for whatever reason, I'm drawn to service. Like I'm not going to let this prevent me from living a meaningful life with a purpose because just because I'm blind. And especially, I think this is me looking back, I think some of that is probably, I'm in this position where I'm having to have my parents wipe my ass in the bathroom because of my own doing. And there was
Yeah,
no one to blame but myself.
I get that.
And yeah, so that is what, there was obviously there's personality there too. Like that is just how I am. I've always been a high achiever and someone who seeks to excel and not just exist in
Yeah,
things. But
yeah,
yeah, so for you, I mean, you're 16. I was at least a man. I mean, a young man at this point, but I'd had some more life experience. I can't imagine
right.
what that's like as a 16-year-old.
Well, from my end, it's a little bit similar, except like I was, 16 going into that 17 stage. I was actually kind of going into the senior year of like my last of high school, and here I am, high school quarterback. I played varsity. I had a little bit of recognition, so my game plan was all right. For me, I'm going to the pros. That's that was my idea, and so to be in that hospital in that moment, to have my coach come up, but I'm a backtrack. The first thing was when the doctor came into the office once I woke up from surgery and whatnot. This kind of when I was able to kind of recall a lot of the things. The first thing he was saying to me was like, all right, Mr. Fleeks. So everything is dark. You do realize like you're not going to be able to read text, or you're not going to be able to see light, or you're not going to be able to see details. I'm just like, so what you saying, Doc? I'm blind? He's like, yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He's
I
like,
was
in
like,
case you didn't notice, yes, you are blind. Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, okay, well, that explained the darkness. But then I'm just, for me, I'm just like, okay, but why am I not able to move? And it was like, well, you had a stroke while we was operating. Your heart stopped. We had to do like 3 aneurysm surgeries because you had the skull fracture, and you had some coils. So we had to kind of fix that. And while we was doing that, you end up having strokes, and because of the stroke, it paralyzed your left side. And so for me, the blindness went out the window. Like I started worrying about that honestly, because I started asking more questions like, wait, what you mean paralyzed? Like how long are we talking about this? And he's just like, well, I don't know if you're ever going to receive feeling in your left side. I'm just like, I stopped him right there. I said, nah, doc, that's not me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been this, I've just been this able-bodied kid for all my life. My family is pretty much from Texas and Louisiana, so I've had my times dealing on the farm. I'm used to doing a lot of work. I'm always the one to count on. I'm the big guy, so anything heavy, anything, I'm the mule. So I'm always had that type of just thought process about myself. Like I'm too strong, I'm too big. Like can't nothing slow me down, stop me, or anything
It's
like that.
very capable.
Exactly. So once he's saying, I'm going to be paralyzed for the rest of my life. I'm just like, nah, that's not for me. I never saw that story, never visualized that, never even accepted it. And so, the doctors is like, okay, you're just talking. But that whole time, like, this is 2 weeks of me in the ICU. That whole 2 weeks, I'm just trying to send signals to my body, like, hey, left side move, lift your arm up, lift your leg, like, hey, make this move, and
Yeah.
I'm doing this every day. I was in ICU for about 2.5 months, but I say 2 weeks is because within those 2 weeks I lifted my arm up. You know what I mean? And the doc came in, and I told my mom, I said, "Nah, don't say anything. I'm about to show him something." And she's like, "What you?" I was like, "Hold on, just don't say nothing." And as he come in, he's like, "Mr. Fleeks, how's it going?" I just lifted up my left arm and said, "I'm doing fine. How you doing,
Give him the
doc?"
bird. You're
Right.
like, this is what I'm talking about.
And he was just like, "Oh, wait, did you?" I said, "Yes, sir. I definitely did, sir." And he was just like, "Okay, well, I guess I can start writing this off and get you some PT. Let's start getting you up and moving and get you get your muscles back strong. And then so we went from him saying that I'm not going to be able to move and he don't know what's going to happen to, all right, well, we got to stand up for this amount of days. Let's build this strength back up. You got to hold your arm like this. Let's build this strength back up. So for me, it was just like I refused to just to lose to that.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt even like with the blindness. Like, my mom was like, okay, so what we gonna do? I just told her, like, shoot, I'm gonna live. Like, we're just gonna live this differently. You gonna make sure I get me a pretty girl. I'm gonna take care of you. I'm gonna get this money. And she's like, you talking like this? I'm like, mama, because I'm blind, this don't mean nothing. Like, I'm not about to stop this. Like, I'm still gonna live this life. I mean, I had to go through the journeys. Of course, it's frustrations
And
and
grieving that.
it
And
it
yeah.
exactly. And even my grieving process was different. Like, a lot of counselors would even tell me, like, man, you need to cry. You haven't properly grieved this. I'm like, what? I don't know. I don't have to cry about this. It's just like playing poker. Look, I got dealt this card and we just gonna keep playing like until we
Well,
win.
that's interesting. I didn't cry until like a year and a half after, and it was on like it was happy. Like when I did, it was I'd accomplished something that we had a couple of us had hiked to summit this mountain, and like I had done it without holding on to anyone. I just followed people with trekking poles by myself, and like, but I was like, oh my God, like it was like how far I've come kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I love it. I love the strength. That's why when I start listening to your episode, I was like, man, yes, I got to get this man on because it's similar. Like, I mean, it's from your Marine stories and all that, but I'm just like, yo, the strength is so much similar. You know what I'm saying? And I really admire that for
Well, and
sure.
it's like, I mean, I admire that in you too. And that's again, even like while you were telling that, even if you hadn't regained that movement, like that mentality was still there and you still would have overcome, okay, yeah, I am paralyzed on that side because you made that choice. And people don't, I'm not saying there's not going to be time where you struggle again. We both just touched on there is a grieving process and time to grieve. And like for me, it was, I struggled not having my sense of independence more so than being blind. And,
Yes, sir.
but I chased that. That was like the one thing that I wanted back and I got it back. But so for people, like if you're hearing this and you're early on to this is doable. It's a mindset thing. It is you do have a choice. It is your choice if you let this dictate the rest of your life or if it will just become another footnote in your story.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's why I try to tell people all the time, like, it's a possible thing. Life is possible, and it's just what you make it. You can choose to lay down or you can stand up and just push these doors open. You know what I mean?
And perspective is such, I mean, it's really pivotal in that sense of yeah, for me, it became focusing on the things that I could do early on, even when I couldn't really do anything. If I would
Yeah,
get, there was the small wins and focusing on that rather than what you can't, because that is again, that doesn't help you focusing on the things that you can't do
real
unless it
talk.
is within your control to get back to being able to do it. But that is going to take time. And again,
Yeah,
it's
I find ourselves just chasing, our former selves, but within that chase, you still have to understand, like, okay, I got to modify this to get back to, to do this like this, how I was doing. All right, let me modify this so I can, get on the skates like I used to be. So it's just like, for me, it's like, okay, let me just modify different things to get back to that one self as much as close to that self as I can. But I realize I still gonna have to do this in modification because of the blindness.
yeah, and you have to be okay with that too when you do arrive
Yeah.
there. And maybe it's not
Mhm.
the exact same, but like you're getting as close to that as you can. And like, yeah, this is your life now.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And that brings me to my next question because you're so physically active. You're in the jiu-jitsu, rock climbing, you've done the snowboarding. So for my listeners, tell me what would push you to be that physically active like that, even with the blindness.
Some of that, so I grew up playing sports year round. I mentioned that earlier.
Hmm.
I've always been very active and I really like pride myself on being able to just kind of do whatever opportunity comes up. So like even now, like I lift weights 6 days a week and then hit Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes 4 or 5 days a week as well. So like today I worked out for an hour and a half and then went to jiu-jitsu for another hour afterwards and sparred with people. And like it's being able to just be flexible and do all of those things is very important to me. And I think people miss that in the role that it can have on your mental health as well. But
Mm,
in terms of getting into all these sports and stuff, some of that was stuff that I used to do. Again, snowboarding for me was my, pre-depression was my favorite thing to do. And
yeah,
that was after I was stabilized in the hospital, I was transferred to the local VA hospital. And when I was there, they had because the private hospital that I had been taken to when I shot myself had no idea what to do with a blind guy. They gave me a Swiffer mop handle with a tennis ball on the end of it, and were basically showing me how to like shoreline the wall to get to the bathroom in my room, and that
that's
was
funny.
about
I,
it. So when when they took me to the VA, they actually had blind rehab professionals there, and they were there during my intake, and this lady asked me like, hey, what do you like to do? And like a jackass, I'm like, well, when I could see, I liked to snowboard and rock climb and downhill mountain bike and
yeah,
run and ride motorcycles. And she was like, well, you can get back into, you will be able to, if you want to, do pretty much all of that except for the motorcycles. And so I latched onto that, and it wound up being that 8.5 months after I shot myself, I was snowboarding again in the Rocky Mountains. And that was
beautiful.
before I could cook for myself, before I was living out on my own. But that was the first like real taste of independence that I got again. And a month after that, I was back in college. 6 months after that, I was back out on my own. And another 6 months later, I'd bought my first house. And like the momentum just kept going. And I wound up getting into, I mean, now I ski, I rock climb, I whitewater kayak. I'd never done that when I could see, and I actually thought it looked like too dangerous to do when I could see, but now I do it totally
Hey,
blind.
what I'm telling you, it's possible.
Yeah. And I compete in Brazilian jiu-jitsu against people without any disabilities. I've skydived and surfed, and like all of these opportunities are out there. And again, I think it's yes, it's not the same when I snowboard or when I actually I suck at snowboarding now, so I ski and I can shred on skis and a ski bike, but like, I don't get to enjoy the scenery. But when and I have to have someone like give me directions to get to a run, but once I'm on the run, it is all by feel. And like
Yeah,
it's accepting that, and I don't have any sense of smell because of where I shot myself, but like I get to hear that noise, and especially when
right.
it's just me on a run and like that muted sound of the snow and the wind going by and just knowing that you're out there and feeling it. And
You're just so free, huh?
yes, and
Yeah,
it's all these things like that are still they're like they were a lifeline for me for sure
yeah,
early on.
definitely
And
pivotal.
now they're still important to me just because I love them, but it's not like what's keeping me afloat. But it was for me, that was definitely something that in the early days was like the light at the end of the tunnel for me. Have you gotten into any of that stuff?
And I was gonna share that with you because after my ICU and they started seeing I developed my strength back and everything. One of my PT nurses, she asked me, she's like, so the same question she asked you. I didn't get hit with the broomstick and the tennis ball, but I got I got hit with the walker and the tennis ball, and it was like, well, you could just use the walker and just hit the wall like this, and this can kind of could tell you where you. Just like, I don't want to. This is not. And so she was just like asking me like, so what do you want to do? I said, look, I've been in sports since I was 5. I played football, basketball. I was in track. My mom put me in martial arts. I did boxing. So I'm just like, I'm an active guy, and I'm going to get back to that. She's like, oh yeah, there's no reason why you can't. And so, the hospital I was at, they worked out a little situation where they sent me over to the rehabilitation hospital here in Houston, Texas, which is called TIER. And that's kind of a major rehab. Like it's kind of where we send all our NFL players, like just major type of work that you needed done. You go to TIER. They even fly people out from Buffalo to this location. So it's a big deal. And so
Yeah.
once they told me about it, I was like, oh, okay, okay, y'all taking this serious. So when I get in there, I get hooked up with my physical therapist team, and I remember this guy Jim. He was just like, "All right, man, I'm gonna work you because I heard you trying to you want to get back active." He's like, he's like, the first thing I got for you, we about to go outside. I say, huh? He said, yeah, we about to go outside. I heard you was a quarterback. I said, oh, all right, let's go outside then. So he takes me outside the facility and we just in this grass. And he's like, what you want to do? And I was like, honestly, I just want to move right now. Like I haven't had grass under my feet. Like I feel like I'm back in my, my natural habitat. It's like, okay, let's move. And so he just held my wrist and I just got to like just jogging. Like it was like a light little jog, wasn't nothing too crazy, but just the fact that I was able to get on that grass and start doing that, that just lit me up.
Well,
And
and
from
you've
there,
probably been in those stupid grippy hospital socks for the
oh, my
past 2 months.
my goodness,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the compression socks squeezing on my feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
The socks with the little tactile at the bottom. That them things so annoying. But
Uh,
yeah, so just the fact to be back on that. Then he brought out a little football. I held it in my hand, and just from now, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get back onto some type of field. And so start looking up different sports for the blind. And I found out about the different adaptive sports like beat baseball. So I got myself involved in that. And so I've been in
hmm.
beat baseball for quite some time now. That and goal ball and just different little sports like that. And so that was for me, it equivalated for me being in organized sports. So me playing for the different B baseball teams that I played for and the different goal ball teams. That was my way of getting back to the athletic B.
See, that's actually, I haven't tried any of those, like the adaptive blind sports. All of the adaptive stuff that I've done has been like, more stuff that either I used to do or was interested in doing. Like I had never done jujitsu, but I wrestled in high school. So like, but yeah, I haven't tried any of the basically auditorily adapted things. Uh,
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's definitely competitive, especially the baseball. I thought it was going to be because when I first was reading about it, I was like, oh man, it's going to be some type of hold your hand and oh, you hit the ball, Timmy. Okay, run, run, run. I was like,
yeah.
but I want to be on the field. I need to be in some sports. So I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna give this a try. Man, when I went out there, yo, once I saw they wasn't holding your hand, and I'm talking about they say put this blindfold on, grab this bat, we gonna throw the ball. Listen, swing. Once you hit, listen for this other base, run to it, full speed. If you about to run into something, if you hear stop, stop. If not, keep running. I say,
Yeah.
really? Hey, what? I missed the first few times and I hit the ball. And so, what you doing? Run. I was like, oh, you're right. And I just took out. And from taking out and being able to run full speed, that got me. It sold me. I was like, I'm so free. I don't need nobody holding me. I'm showing my athletic ability. And that's when they was like, oh my goodness, you are fast. I was like, yeah, nah, I'm that guy.
Well, yeah, if you were playing football, varsity quarterback in what'd you say, Texas or
Yeah,
Louisiana? Yeah, like
Texas, yeah.
that's those boys can play football. So like you're a stud if you're playing quarterback there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It
Yeah.
was a very big deal. And I wasn't in no small school. I'm talking about we 5A. So we playing big boys. I played against fellas who's actually was in the NFL. They're retired now, because I'm 35. So my little generation, they starting to
Okay.
fade out.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a good feeling. And just to be able to get back on that field and just I equivalent to that to football in a way because I'm on grass and just being able to be free and they hit the ball and I'm running, tracking the ball down with my ears, diving on the ground,
Yeah.
stopping that bad ball, holding it up before somebody get to the base. Like it just feels so good just be able to just be that athletic. So that's
Well,
that's what it was for me.
yeah, and again, like you could have sat and bitched and moaned that, well, it's not football. But
Right.
again, you pick your battles and like celebrate
Hey,
the victories there.
like I said, it's like a game of poker, baby. Sometimes you just gonna get a card you might not like, but it don't
Yeah.
mean just stop playing. Yeah, hit me again. Let's keep rolling. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
let's just keep rolling with it, man. So most definitely. So and now let's get into what we got going on now, because now I see that you working on your memoir, you have a book and everything coming out. Talk to us more about that. What made you want to get involved with that?
Gosh, yeah. So I got a lot going on now. Basically, like I said, I got back into college January of 2020 and was out on my own halfway through the year, and then had bought my first house and was like isolated in Denver end of 2020 into early 2021. And
Blessings.
I I started to struggle in early 2021 and like really that was, I would say, because I was sober through that, the depression was worse than it was even leading up to my suicide attempt. But I got through it because I spoke up.
Mm,
I was terrified that I was going to be ripped out of my house and put in a padded room or something but I knew if I didn't speak up, because I had a psychologist that I would talk to once a week.
hmm.
I knew if I didn't speak up where that was going to go, because I'd learned my lesson and I wasn't going to do that to my family again. And
Yeah.
so I spoke up, and it took several months, but I got through it. And like that was a huge learning lesson for me of, it got to the point where we were talking sometimes multiple times a day, because I did not, in my bones, did not want to be here. And I didn't know why, because by all measures, like things were going great for me, but I was just struggling. I mean, there was no real reason to it. But also later that year, after I'd come out of that rut, I hit
Hmm.
my first statistics class or my first math class in the path to college, which
Yeah.
is a big challenge for blind people because
Yes,
of the visual
indeed.
nature. But
Man,
also, you got to remember, I'm a Marine, so it's an extra challenge.
you like that.
But it's oh no, I'm like their stereotype is that Marines are dumbasses. So that was me
Yeah,
saying
that is
Marine.
that. I hear you. I hear
But
you.
yeah,
That's how they feel
so
about jocks, and I had to prove that wrong in statistics as well. So I,
yeah.
I feel you.
But my university wasn't making my stuff accessible for that class, and instead they assigned someone to be my eyeballs, and that pissed me off. So I started
Mm,
researching. All right, I'm able to do all of these things and ski, and I live on my own. I can pay my mortgage, but I can't do my math homework. Like, what's going on here? How come
right,
I
like
how
flip the coin, somebody.
yeah, I was like, why, like, what's causing that? How come my screen reader can't work with this stuff? And I found out that it all came down to the code of each app or website that you access. Like developers, when they're designing the front end, which is all the visual and the components that you interact with, when they design that stuff, they can take deliberate steps to make that accessible. And
Yeah.
so I said, screw this. I'm going to become part of the solution. And I dropped out of college and started teaching myself how to code. At that same time, I also, I hadn't realized that I was an alcoholic leading up to my suicide attempt until I picked up alcohol one night. It was after my first exam and like right before I dropped out and started teaching myself how to code just to blow off some steam, but it like unlocked my addiction that was there that I hadn't realized was an addiction. And
Mm,
that wound up, I mean, I'm about 15 months sober now, but that was 2.5 years of rampant alcoholism ensued after that, to the extent where at its worst, because by the time I had finally realized that I needed help, I went to rehab to, try and kick the habit. And
yeah.
while I was there, I was diagnosed with a horrible neurological disorder that is genetic, and there's nothing I can do about it. It is incurable currently. I mean, medical advances might change that, but that will eventually it kills your brain tissue and will eventually turn me into a vegetable. And because I was in already, a compromised and weak state from drinking as much as I was, and basically
Mm.
having drank away my ability to deal with stress. When I came back from rehab, my drinking got worse, because now it was like, now I have another excuse.
Yeah, they
So,
hit you with a heavy load. I hear you.
yeah.
Right.
So, at its worst, I was binging for 2 or 3 days straight, like blackout binges, recovering for 2 or 3 days, and then doing it all over again. But so that was 2021, 2022, 2023. My first app came out on the 4th of July, and it wound up winning Apple Viz Game of the Year and Mobile Accessible Games Game of the Year at the end of that year. But I really once that came out and it was starting to be really well received is when I started making progress with this sobriety. And I got like a month sober, fell off the wagon, and made it 2.5 months sober, and then fell off the wagon one night on December 5th of 2023, and I haven't had a drink since. And like, but it was I'd finally like put something into the world that was helping people again and had come full circle to where I felt like I had a purpose and an identity, and that carried
Hmm.
through. Like it was obvious to me, okay, now I am going to get sober. And I knew, people had been telling me for a couple of years that I needed to write a book. And of course, I thought that was silly because I hadn't really accomplished anything yet. I had
I hear that.
shot myself and was blind and was like doing some interesting things, but I hadn't accomplished anything. And especially even by the time that I knew that my first app was gonna come out, which was called Xanagrams. I just recently took it off the App Store because I have too many things on my plate to keep up with, including the
I hear you.
next software project that I'm working on. But I it was clear to me that like I was going to get sober after that. And so when like mid January of 2024, I started writing my book, and it's a memoir that delves into all of this stuff, my story more in depth, but specifically, touching on the agency that we have in life, and that with all these things piled up, obviously the blindness is my own fault, the alcoholism is my own fault, and the Huntington's is not. But
Yeah.
the all of these things and these different issues and these really potential branching points in our lives and our paths, like
Hmm.
we do have the choice to dictate where that goes. And okay,
Hmm.
yeah, that you can start to make excuses. Well, my environment wouldn't allow me for this. Okay, well, there was still another alternative at some point farther down the path. Like
Yes,
you
indeed.
can choose, and you can choose your mindset, and you can dictate your decisions in the context of what options are available to you. And so it
Mm.
explores all that. It explores mental health stuff, the addiction, and specifically not it's not like a, well, this is how you should get sober. It's exploring, I did some shit that I'm ashamed of while I was drinking. And
Yeah, I hear you.
that's part of these paths too, is we you see these overcoming stories and these like recovery stories, and but they're almost like sanitized of any of
Uh-huh.
like a lot of the reality to maintain the virtue of the person whose story it is.
Yes,
And
sir.
so it's the reality of like this stuff's not pretty, and you will stumble, and hopefully give people an understanding who have lost people to suicide of the insane place, because I really don't believe that you're in a sane state of mind anymore if you've reached that point where you want to kill
Mm-mm.
yourself.
I agree.
Maybe having some understanding of that, because I've got suicide on both sides of my family and murder suicide on one side, and I thought that those people were cowards and selfish when before I'd ever faced real
Yeah, what you had to
depression
do.
and
Hmm.
reached and you might still think that even hearing me say that, and that's fine, but I give people insight to that and also address, like, I think the warning signs that we talk about are kind of bullshit. I think they're really missing the boat on a lot of that stuff
Oh yeah.
through the addiction stuff. And like, hey, this is what worked for me to get sober. I didn't work a program. I don't have a sponsor. It's this stuff, again, you can find your own way. And there is the other side of that, where like I've come out on the other side. I've got the book finished. Or the second draft of the book is finished, but I've built this company. This new one that I'm working on should hopefully, I mean, hoping it grows into a full blown startup where I'm trying to really revolutionize education for people with disabilities. And
Nice.
it won't just be for people with disabilities, but this platform is looks and functions normally for people without disabilities, but is accessible to basically virtually every physical disability, just like my first piece of software was. And
Nice.
got that stuff. And, it's a lot of this is just spreading the word and hoping that sharing my story saves lives. I was just on Monday's episode of Dr. Phil and getting to talk about some of this stuff. And
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
just like, I think if someone hears my story, or at least the hope is, because I think if I had heard a story like mine leading up to my suicide attempt that probably would have snapped me out of that insane place that I was in because like holy shit, this is a very capable person and has been through some
Hmm.
shit, but he's still at this point all because he's not speaking up because that is looking back, that is absolutely what got me there is I wasn't speaking up and
I feel that.
couple that with alcohol and that's fucking dangerous.
Yeah.
And but that's the hope with that stuff and then now go my podcast is going in blind. It's it's not just stories of overcoming. I'm speaking with people who have accomplished in the face of adversity and who have, thought leaders and just having these
Right.
deep discussions where people can learn from them like you're doing. And I think there's a lot of value in that because it makes these
So
topics,
much.
yeah, it makes these topics, whatever it is. Like I just had a guy on who we talked about regenerative agriculture, but like hearing that through conversation with an expert like that is so much more digestible and consumable than reading an 11-hour long book on it. It
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
it is. And I think a lot of this stuff, I, because of my own story, these themes keep showing up in other people's stories. I think it maybe makes them feel comfortable with opening up. Just like, when you and I start talking, we're like, there's so many parallels here. It makes it easy to open up.
Yes, it
And
does.
I so I, it's powerful conversations that hopefully people will learn from in multiple avenues.
Real talk, and that's what this is about. I like to say behind every success story that is an ugly road. And I think that's what people fail to look at. They only see like, oh, they're making it now. They're at this point now, but yeah, but you just don't know that route they really had to take to get there, and that's why we need to sit back and just listen to these testimonies and just understand like where we at, it's not always going to be pretty. It's the fight within you, and you must, stay true to your heart. And that's what I really enjoy when I discovered across, your podcast and then the whole good jazz. And I was just listening to it, and I'm just like, man, this man is talking to some incredible people and just breaking these stories. I'm just like, you know what, we need our listeners to see this and to hear this because it's not done and it's not easy, but however, it's still a manageable thing. It's just all about what we put our mind to and what we believe in our hearts.
Yeah, and this is gonna sound super corny. I realized it right. I was about to say it, then I was like, this is
Hey,
gonna
just drop it on the
sound
table, baby.
it's like the not giving up thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you hear through other people's stories. Some people may have figured something out on the first try. Most don't, or if they did say that they figured it out on the first try, they're probably not being very truthful.
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I agree.
but there's all okay. Even if there those options don't work for you, there is another option. Again, it's like you have to be relentless in whatever you're seeking, whether that's you learning a new skill or overcoming something is rough as losing your sight. It's life and everyone has their shit. Like
Yeah.
you don't see that, but everyone does.
Everybody. Like for me, even now, just having that mindset of like, okay, I'm back on grass and whatnot. Even though I was going to these adaptive sports, I was not using a cane. I would tell my friends like, nah, just walk in front of me. I'm gonna listen. And he's like, bro, like, nah, I'm not grabbing his cane, bro. That looks silly to me. And so for me, I was always fighting. Like I'm about to be that blind guy. Like I am who I am. I just happen to not have the sight, but I am still who I was. And it took for me getting hit by a truck, running into to fire hydrants,
Oh,
just little silly, stupid things that I could have saved myself a lot of, the different body traumas and things like that just
well,
by
that's
picking up the cane and just being more confident within, what I'm saying, I'm just a man who happened to be blind and I'm doing this way. But now it ain't nothing I won't do without my cane. You know what I mean? Like I love the blind individual that I've become, and the strength that I am. And so it's like I'm not ashamed of it no more. But for a good 5 years, man, like I was ashamed of that. And I didn't talk up, I didn't speak about it. I just held it in and just kept like trying to put a smile on my face. just to show because I'm still that same strong, gentleman that everyone knows. But however, I'm hurting because I'm like, yo, I'm this making me feel a little bit less than. I don't want to pick up this thing and get out here and tap this stick around until I figure out where I'm going. I don't want to do that. But I realize like it's not about the want, bro. It's about you living within yourself and people see that and then it inspires and it inspires other people to like, hey, like, what am I out here bitching for? Like, this man is out here navigating to a damn bus stop, and traffic is zooming by, but he's like no fear, just out here getting it. So it was those type of moments where made me open up. It's like, you know what, I gotta speak on this. I gotta
Yeah.
I gotta show that this is not the end of the world. And even me, when I went back to college, I dealt with professors. I even had a it's crazy because one of my algebra professors, I'm coming into his class with my guide dog, and he just like, whoa, 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 hold on. I'm just like, what's wrong? It's like, you supposed to be here? I was like, yeah, this is college algebra, right? And he's just like, yes, sir. He was like, well, how am I going to teach you? I said, what?
What's sad is that man has a PhD and he
Yes.
is that ignorant. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and those moments like that, just dealing with that in college, I've dealt with some deans that had that mindset. It took for me to sit down with my coordinator of the disability office and the president of the campus, and I sat down and with them, and I expressed my feelings, and I let them know like I'm far from dumb. You know what I mean? It's not on me that this man can open his mind outside the box and learn that all he has to do is just recite some numbers in the air, and we're able to solve them out. And
Well, and I think that's important. This is another that I see people bitching about this a lot is having to advocate for themselves. And like,
yeah,
yeah, maybe you shouldn't have to, but also
you got to though.
I was 23 years old when I shot myself and I'd never met a blind person in my life. So like these people don't know and like stop being an asshole about advocating for yourself. It's just part of your life. Like,
Real,
sorry, you got to speak up and like
got to.
quit bitching about it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's and
Yeah.
that's what it is. You got to speak up for yourself. You got to advocate, and it's a way we can advocate. Like, we don't have to be the aggressive, entitled, like little something that I've seen some people be, and I'm just like, you know what, I can advocate without showing that I'm entitled to have this. Like, even though it'll be nice and it'll be cool to have these accommodations flow a little easier, but like you just said, I didn't know a blind person when I before once I lost my sight or whatever. I only seen one blind guy and then the other was on a movie. And it was funny because I actually saw that movie like a month before I actually got shot and became blind, which
Set you
was
up for success.
yeah, it was the Ray Charles. And that was, I used to think about that too, because I was
No
like,
way.
and that's kind of how I felt into the like, I'm not about to walk with no cane, because I used to watch Ray Charles on this movie. Just this man wasn't using no cane. He didn't do none of that good jazz. But I mean, it was a different time era.
Yeah.
However, what I'm saying, the strength that he was showing. And so I took that in a negative way, but then I also flipped it and turned it positive, because I was like, you know what? Ray Charles still didn't let anything stop him. He didn't slow down with his blindness, none of that. So it's like, why would I slow down? Why would I even
Yeah.
act like I'm entitled to these things? But we do need to speak up on these things. That's when I created me an organization at my college, for the disability community there, and just for us to network and kind of get out in the student body. And so
Yeah.
that's when I became like, okay, you know what? You got to use your strength to become a backbone for the blind community. That's why I like to call myself the blind security of the community, because I'm gonna be here to step up.
Yeah. I wanted to ask
I'm
you
gonna
about that.
I'm gonna protect. Like, I'm gonna speak up. I'm going to talk about it. I'm gonna build the awareness. If anybody have any questions, I'm gonna break it down for you. Like, I'm gonna be that guy. I'm not gonna sit back and just not say anything, because I know what that feels like, and we just get looked over.
And the key to that is yes, you do have to advocate, you have to speak up, but do it tactfully and don't do it like calling someone out in front of a group, right? When
There
there's
you
an
go.
educational moment, pull someone to the side when it's in private and just be like, like, just so you know, like, this isn't how you guide someone. Like, don't grab my arms. If I prefer to grab onto your arm, not like, hey, don't touch me.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But people are crazy.
That's love. That's love, my man. Love for sure. So just for and so you talked about the company and everything that you work on. So just a little bit of that story. What have been some of the digital challenges that you had to face with that?
So I taught myself how to code entirely from reading articles online.
Beautiful.
I you would think with software developers being the ones who make things accessible that all of that stuff would be accessible. It's not, and neither are the tools that I have to write the code in. You have to write code in they're called integrated development environments, and it's basically it's a place where you can write your code, manage all the files of your project, and also compile your code all the way down to binary so that a device can run it. You can test it on there and all that stuff. But
Mm,
those tools are not fully accessible. And so
mm,
it's been a bunch of stuff with that, but it honestly it's can be very, very frustrating at times. And there's going to be
yeah.
other blind developers that are like nodding their heads to this right now. But it is also who better to make those changes and to be doing the accessibility work than people who need it,
There we
right?
go.
Like those implementations are always going to be better. It's like if you're creating a product for a certain demographic and choosing to do that on your own or having consulted that demographic, it's going to be way better if you consult that demographic. And this is also something I try and talk about because it is software developers get paid really well. And this is, our community has a hard time getting employed sometimes, which
Hmm.
I think some of that also comes down to like, okay, maybe you have some cards stacked against you, but like stop making excuses and go
There we
make it
go.
work. Unpopular opinion, but I talk about it. And
Hey, all day long.
um, this is a great area for people to get into. And because it is, yeah, you're gonna have to deal with inaccessible software, but that's really any workplace that you're in. And it's a skill that's not going to go away. You're like, yeah, AI is becoming more of a player, and one day we'll be doing all the work, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. Like
Yeah.
you're at least going to have developers there, kind of holding the AI's hand and stuff like that. And so this is
Right on.
another field where just I think people should consider it, but that's I'm not at a place where I'm ready to like announce what that's called yet, but I'm hoping that by the end of the year, this next thing will be out. I've been working on it since last March, so it's been about a year. But um, also, with the book, like I said, I finished the second draft. I've got some people giving me some feedback. Then I'll write a third draft and then start pitching agents and stuff like that. So
Nice.
at that point, that's kind of out of my hands in terms of timeline, and it'll just have to basically see basically just keep up with me so that
Yep.
when I get news on it, I can announce it. And I'm available kind of everywhere. If you look at my name in whatever platform, you'll
Oh
find me.
yeah,
But
we're gonna have the links up to your podcast, and now trust me, we're gonna make sure the listeners be able to keep up with you and find you,
okay.
man. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I
Yes, sir.
also, my website, zacktidwell.net, has a mailing list that you can sign up for. It
There
is
we go.
not, it's not a spam mailing list. I've had the thing for over a year and haven't sent out an email yet. It is literally just to keep people up to date with news about the book. I might start sending out like a monthly one about the podcast, but you're not going to get spammed or anything like that. So it's another great way to keep up with me or the
For
podcast.
for
Yeah.
sure. For sure, for sure. And just about to wrap it up here, my man. I really appreciate you sitting down and just sharing your story and man, your strength. I knew this was gonna be awesome. But just for my listeners, man, you have any last conveying words that you would like to leave for them, just good gems.
If you are that person who's hearing this and is struggling right now, two things. You have to speak up. No one can help you if no one knows that you're struggling. It's not a weak thing to do. Like at what point ever in life do we ever think that the difficult thing to do is weak? Like we have to get that out of our heads. It's not easy to speak up, and it's not a weak thing to speak up. You deserve to get better. And the second part of that is that it can and will get better if you show up and do the work. Like it will be work, and it's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be comfortable, and it's not going to be easy. It will be a process, but it does get better. And remember that, right? When you're in those dark times, like there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows flying out of your butt, but you can get through it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Hey, y'all heard it best itself, man, from my man, Zach. Hey, once again, big salute to you, Zach. We appreciate you for everything that you're doing, man, changing the community, impacting, and just sharing your story and showing that, you know, like you said, it is the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's all about the strength and just following through.
Blind table talk, yeah.